Do you know that? Toxic parents often use guilt, shame, or fear to control their children's behavior, undermining their emotional autonomy and self-esteem. Toxic parents may dismiss or ignore their child's need for privacy, independence, or emotional space, creating a sense of powerlessness and confusion in the child. In toxic households, affection and approval may be tied to obedience or performance, teaching children that their worth depends on meeting unrealistic expectations. Today, we're exploring the lasting impact of growing up with toxic parents and how those early experiences can quietly shape our adult lives, our relationships, and even the way we see ourselves. Growing up in an unpredictable environment can leave children feeling insecure and hypervigilant. Your nervous system is trained to anticipate conflict or criticism because it was a regular part of your home life. As adults, this anxiety may manifest in relationships or work environments where others might find comfort or ease. Recognizing this pattern is the first step towards understanding your emotional landscape. In a toxic household, unpredictability is the norm. One moment things feel okay, and the next, the energy shifts. Suddenly you're walking on eggshells, trying not to say the wrong thing. Over time, this trains your nervous system to stay in a constant state of alertness. You become emotionally wired to anticipate tension, criticism, or conflict, even when none is present. As an adult, this shows up in subtle but painful ways. You may feel uneasy in moments of silence or struggle to trust when things are going well. You might overanalyze texts, tone of voice, or facial expressions, reading into things that aren't there just to protect yourself from being blindsided. What's really happening here is that your body remembers what your mind tries to forget. That anxious edge isn't you being too sensitive. It's a survival mechanism your younger self had to develop in order to feel safe in an unstable home. You may find it hard to relax, even in places where you're supposed to feel secure. Joy can feel unfamiliar. Peace can feel suspicious. Because when you were a child, calm often came with a warning. It wouldn't last. Next is boundary struggles. Do you find it hard to say no? Perhaps you often overextend yourself for others at the expense of your own well-being. Toxic parents might not respect your personal space or autonomy during childhood. As a result, many adults raised in these environments carry over that lack of boundaries into their adult lives. If so, you're not alone. This is a common sign among people who grew up with toxic parents. In a healthy household, boundaries are taught, respected, and even encouraged. But in a toxic environment, your needs may have been dismissed. Your no may have been ignored, and your sense of self might have been constantly violated, whether emotionally, mentally, or even physically. When a parent disregards your personal space, forces you to comply without question, or makes you responsible for their emotions, you learn something dangerous, that your value is tied to your compliance, not your individuality. As an adult, this plays out in many quiet but exhausting ways. You may become a chronic people pleaser, overextending yourself to keep the peace. You might say yes when your whole body wants to say no, or you struggle with the fear of disappointing others, even when their demands are unreasonable. You may even find it hard to recognize what your own boundaries are, because you were never taught they were yours to have in the first place. But here's the truth. Boundaries are not walls. They are bridges. Clear signals that help protect your energy while allowing healthy connection with others. And if you grew up without them, learning to set and honor your own limits might feel uncomfortable at first. But it's one of the most powerful steps in reclaiming your self-worth. Trust is foundational in any relationship. However, if you grew up feeling betrayed or manipulated by those closest to you, trusting others can feel impossible. Your mind may default to suspicion as a protective measure. Understanding that trust issues are rooted in past experiences helps contextualize these feelings. They are not flaws within you, but rather reflections of what you've been through. When you grow up in a household where trust was consistently broken, it can feel nearly impossible to offer it freely as an adult. Maybe promises were made and never kept. Maybe secrets you confided in were used against you. Or perhaps affection was conditional, offered one day, withdrawn the next. When the people who were supposed to protect you became sources of emotional pain or manipulation, your young mind adapted by building a shield. Don't trust, and you won't get hurt. As a result, many adult children of toxic parents approach the world through a lens of suspicion, not because they want to, but because their nervous system still believes it's the only way to stay safe. You might find yourself overanalyzing motives, waiting for the other shoe to drop, or pulling away the moment someone gets too close. Vulnerability may feel like danger instead of connection. Even when people prove themselves trustworthy, part of you may still hold back, just in case. This doesn't mean you're cold or unloving. It means you were taught, through experience, that trust was risky. That's a hard truth to carry, but also one you can begin to unpack and gently release. Healing starts with acknowledging that your trust issues aren't flaws. They're survival responses. They once protected you, and now they're asking to be softened, not shamed. With time, patience, and the right support, you can learn what safe connection feels like. You can begin to build trust slowly, one small step at a time, in relationships that honor your heart instead of hurting it. Many individuals who experience toxic parenting describe feeling as though they were always walking on eggshells. This constant need for caution stems from unpredictable reactions from parents. One moment things are fine, the next they could explode into chaos. This learned behavior keeps your guard up even in safe situations today. Recognizing this instinct is crucial for creating healthier environments moving forward. Living in a home where the emotional climate could change in an instant teaches you one thing above all: stay small, stay quiet, and stay ready. Maybe your parents' mood shifted without warning. A calm conversation could suddenly escalate into shouting, or a simple mistake could result in silent treatment, guilt, or rage. This unpredictability wires your brain to constantly scan for danger, to anticipate reactions, and to avoid anything that might trigger an explosion. As a child, you learned that your safety depended on how well you could manage someone else's emotions. And even now, as an adult in safe environments, you might find yourself holding back your opinions, censoring your words, or over-apologizing for things that aren't your fault. You might avoid conflict at all costs, not because you're passive, but because your body remembers what happened the last time things got tense. This hypervigilance isn't your personality, it's your survival response. A response built over years of trying to maintain peace in a home that never felt stable. The important thing to know is this: you're not overreacting, and you're not imagining it. That eggshell feeling was very real, and it served a purpose. But now, you deserve more than just survival. Recognizing this instinct is powerful. It allows you to start asking, am I really unsafe, or am I responding to an old fear? With time, you can begin to unlearn the need to tiptoe and instead learn how to stand firmly, in your truth, in your voice, in your worth. A common sign is having a fragile sense of self-worth. Perhaps compliments make you uncomfortable because deep down, you question their validity. Toxic parenting often involves conditional love. You may have been praised only for certain achievements, while other aspects were dismissed. Realizing that your value isn't dependent on external validation opens pathways toward self-acceptance and resilience. You hear kind words, but instead of accepting them, your mind searches for reasons why they aren't true. Deep down, you may feel unworthy of praise, success, or even love. This often stems from growing up in an environment where love was conditional, where you were only acknowledged when you performed, achieved, or pleased. You may have been celebrated for good grades, but criticized or ignored when you expressed emotions, made mistakes, or simply wanted to be seen for who you were. Over time, this teaches a painful lesson. Your worth is tied to what you do, not who you are. As an adult, this fragile self-worth can lead to perfectionism, overachievement, or people-pleasing. You might feel a constant need to prove yourself. At work, in relationships, even to yourself, because somewhere inside, There's a fear that if you're not good enough, you'll be rejected. You might also notice a harsh inner critic, a voice inherited from the past, replaying messages like, "You're not doing enough," or "You'll never be good enough." It's exhausting, and it's not the truth. Here's what is true. Your value has never been dependent on your performance. You are not only worthy when you're productive, agreeable, or successful. You were worthy the whole time, even when your parents didn't make you feel that way. Recognizing this is a quiet revolution. It's the first step toward building a deeper, unshakable sense of self, one that doesn't collapse when things go wrong or when someone fails to affirm you. Have you noticed yourself repeating unhealthy patterns in your relationships? Perhaps you're drawn to people who are emotionally distant, critical, or even controlling. Maybe you find yourself playing the same roles over and over again: caretaker, peacekeeper, fixer, even when it leaves you feeling empty. When we grow up in toxic environments, our minds normalize dysfunction. What felt chaotic or painful as a child might now feel familiar as an adult, not because we enjoy it, but because we learn to survive in it. And what we survive, we often seek again, believing that this time we might finally get it right. This is how the cycle repeats itself, not because we're weak, but because we're wounded. It's not uncommon to choose partners who reflect unresolved childhood dynamics. A part of us wants to rewrite the story, to turn rejection into acceptance or neglect into love. But instead, we end up re-traumatizing ourselves. Once we recognize the pattern, we gain the power to change it. We begin to ask new questions. Why do I feel drawn to people who don't see me? Why do I tolerate behavior that hurts? What would it look like to choose safety over familiarity? These questions open the door to healing, and with time, reflection, and support, you can learn to form relationships that are grounded in respect, mutual care, and emotional safety, not survival. Because you deserve connection that doesn't require self-abandonment. You deserve love that doesn't feel like a battlefield. Emotional dysregulation is another sign. Do your emotions sometimes feel like they arrive all at once, overwhelming, uncontrollable, and unpredictable? Maybe something small triggers an outsized reaction, or you go from calm to furious or sad in an instant. If so, you might be experiencing emotional dysregulation, a common outcome of growing up in a toxic or unstable home. When caregivers dismiss, punish, or ignore your emotions as a child, you don't learn how to understand or regulate them. You might have been told to stop crying, toughen up, or even been shamed for expressing feelings at all. Over time, you feel your feelings are wrong or too much. So what happens? You suppress emotions until they explode, or you fear them so much that even mild discomfort feels unbearable. Maybe you learn to numb out completely, avoiding your own emotional world because no one taught you how to live inside it safely. As an adult, this might look like quick temper flare-ups, shutting down during conflict, crying unexpectedly, or feeling emotionally exhausted from carrying things alone. But here's the truth. There's nothing wrong with having big feelings. What's missing isn't your strength. It's the tools you were never given. Recognizing that emotional dysregulation isn't a flaw, but a learned survival response, can be incredibly freeing. It means you can stop blaming yourself and start learning new, healthier ways to cope. Things like naming your emotions, breathing through them, journaling, or working with a therapist can help you build the emotional resilience you didn't get in childhood. Because you can learn to respond instead of react. You can feel without drowning. And your emotions aren't too much. They're just signals. All they want is to be acknowledged and understood. That is a skill you can absolutely grow, and you're already on your way. Feeling guilty about self-care, a common struggle among those raised by toxic parents, is often rooted in learned beliefs about selfishness versus responsibility toward others' needs first, without taking care of yourself adequately. First. This is incredibly common among people who grew up with toxic or emotionally manipulative parents. In childhood, you may have been conditioned to put others' needs ahead of your own, to be the helper, the peacemaker, the one who keeps the peace, even when it cost you your well-being. You might have been praised for selflessness and made to feel selfish or ungrateful when asserting your own needs. So now, as an adult, that guilt doesn't always go away. It shows up when you try to establish boundaries, when you say no, when you dare to choose yourself. Guilt, in this context, is a learned response. It's your nervous system reacting to unfamiliar territory, territory where you matter, where your rest and joy are valid. Think of guilt as a signal, not a stop sign. It's not telling you that you're bad, it's just pointing to an old belief that no longer serves you. A belief that says you're only lovable when you're giving, sacrificing, or saying yes. And healing begins when you start challenging that belief. Start with small steps. Take the nap, decline the invitation, enjoy time alone without justification. These are not acts of rebellion. They are acts of reclaiming yourself. You are not here only to serve others. You are here to live fully, and that includes taking care of your mental, emotional, and physical well-being without apology. So the next time guilt knocks at your door, gently remind yourself, I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to rest. I am allowed to choose me. Do people-pleasing tendencies resonate with your experience? If so, it could stem from efforts made as children trying desperately to gain approval amid chaotic dynamics at home. People-pleasing is a deeply ingrained habit for many who grew up in toxic or emotionally unstable households. As children, we quickly learn how to survive our environments. If love, approval, or even safety felt conditional, based on your behavior, achievements, or emotional restraint, then you may have adapted by becoming the good kid, the one who keeps the peace, who meets everyone's needs, who doesn't cause trouble. You learned that your worth was tied to how useful, agreeable, or accommodating you could be. But here's the cost. In trying to meet everyone else's expectations, you lost touch with your own. As an adult, this might look like overcommitting, suppressing your true feelings to avoid upsetting others, or feeling responsible for how others feel. And when you do try to set boundaries or speak up, you might feel anxious, guilty, or even afraid of rejection. This isn't weakness, this is survival. But you're no longer that child, and the people-pleasing that once protected you may now be holding you back from genuine self-expression, connection, and peace. The healing path begins with self-awareness. Start by asking yourself, what do I want in this moment? Am I doing this out of genuine desire or out of fear of disapproval? With time, you'll learn that your needs matter just as much as anyone else's. You'll start to honor your limits, your truth, and your voice, not because you're rejecting others, but because you're finally embracing yourself. True connection doesn't require self-abandonment, and your value doesn't come from how well you serve, but from simply being you. You are worthy of love that doesn't require constant proving. You deserve to live a life that reflects your values, your needs, and your joy. Finally, the challenge surrounding forgiveness comes into play here. Forgiveness, especially when it involves deep wounds from our past, can feel like one of the hardest emotional journeys to undertake. You might find yourself replaying old situations, wondering why you didn't speak up, or why you kept trying to win love that was never freely given. You may hold shame for choices you made under pressure, during times when survival, not clarity, was your only goal. And then there's the other. If you grew up with toxic parents, chances are you carry unresolved anger, grief, or resentment, not just toward them, but sometimes, painfully, toward yourself. Side, the struggle to forgive those who hurt you. People who were supposed to protect, nurture, and guide you, but instead criticized, manipulated, or abandoned you. Here's the truth many find hard to accept. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, and it certainly isn't about excusing harmful behavior. It's about releasing yourself from the emotional grip that pain still holds over your life. When we don't forgive, especially ourselves, we carry the weight of the past everywhere we go. That weight can show up as bitterness, distrust, defensiveness, or even self-sabotage. It quietly shapes how we see the world and ourselves. But you don't need to rush. Forgiveness is not a checkbox, it's a process. It unfolds slowly, with compassion, and only when you're ready. Sometimes, forgiveness starts by simply acknowledging how deeply you were hurt. Other times, it begins by saying to yourself, I did the best I could with what I knew then. Letting go doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means you're choosing not to let it control your peace anymore. It means you're ready to reclaim your power, your healing, your voice. Whether you're forgiving a parent, a partner, or the younger version of yourself, you're not betraying your pain. You're honoring your growth. Forgiveness is not about them. It's about you. And you deserve a life unburdened by the past. If any of these signs resonated with you today, I want you to pause and take a deep breath. Not to fix anything, not to figure it all out, but just to acknowledge something powerful. You are not broken. You are not alone. And none of this is your fault. Growing up with toxic or emotionally immature parents can leave behind invisible scars. It can shape the way we see ourselves, how we love, how we trust, and even how we speak to our own hearts. The fact that you're here, listening, reflecting, maybe even seeing your story in a new light, that is proof that healing is already happening. That you're beginning to choose self-awareness over cycles, compassion over criticism, growth over guilt. And healing doesn't demand perfection, it simply asks for presence. Start small, journal your thoughts, set one boundary, practice saying no, speak kindly to yourself, even if it feels unfamiliar. Because every small step you take in the direction of self-understanding is a powerful act of reclaiming your life. You deserve safety. You deserve rest. You deserve relationships that don't hurt. And most of all, you deserve to feel at home within yourself. So be gentle with the parts of you that are still learning, still unlearning, still aching. They're not setbacks, they're doorways. Walk through them with grace. And whenever it gets heavy, come back here. You're not walking this path alone. Thank you for spending this time with me. And if this message touched something in you, consider sharing it. Someone else out there might need it just as much as you did. Until next time, take care of your heart. You're worth every ounce of the healing you're working toward.